Attention, this is World Watch 2.5, calling all Blue Blaze irregulars in the Greater Toronto area. This is Blue Blaze irregular Jeff Warshaw, Blue Blaze irregular 349 and an eighth, and today we're going to be reviewing The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension from 1984. Buckaroo Banzai is probably my favorite cult film of all time, and that I've probably seen it more times than both the Rocky Horror Picture Show and Phantom of the Paradise, and as my friend George knows, that's quite a few times. I love it. It's, as New York Times critic Vincent Canby said, it's pure wacky fun. It's absolutely mad. It makes almost no sense, and yet I love it. If you were to put together the budget just for the principal cast members, it would way exceed the $17 million that it cost to make this film. It stars Peter Weller, Jeff Goldblum, Christopher Lloyd, John Lithgow, Pepe Serna, Carl Lumley, Vincent Chiavelli, Dan Hedaya, Yakov Smirnoff, Ronald Lacey, and the late Rosalind Cash and Ellen Barkin, just to name a few. Billy Vera of Billy and the Beaters is also plays a role of Pinky Carruthers, who's a Blue Blaze irregular. And it's a movie that doesn't explain a whole lot. There's not a lot of exposition. It just kind of pulls you in and you go along with the fun. And there's a lot of fun. It starts off with a brief scroll that tells us that Buckaroo Banzai is the son of a Japanese father and an American mother, and his life has been pulled in several directions at once. He's a brilliant neurosurgeon, a particle physicist, and a rock and roller. And the first scene we see him in, he's performing neurosurgery with Jeff Goldblum, who plays a character called New Jersey, who's kind of an urban cowboy, and there's a funny scene about that I'll tell you about later. And he is planting a subcutaneous microphone in a patient's pineal gland that will allow him to give instructions to his own brain. And then the next thing we see, he's in Texas, and he's testing out a jet car that he is expected to go off to Mach 2. A lot of people are here to witness this test, including the Secretary of Defense and a senator. And the Secretary of Defense makes a crack, Banzai may be fast, but one heat-seeking missile in his history. Well, what he doesn't know is that he and Professor Kita, played by Robert Ito, are planning to test a device called the oscillation overthruster. And what this is it's a device that reorders matter so that people can travel inside between dimensions. And he accelerates very rapidly up to this mountain, then a blue beam shines out from the top of the jet car, and he enters into this next dimension. He sees all this weird lightning and the strange kind of mannequin-like creatures and flashes of light, and then he emerges from the other side of the mountain, which is like 2 miles. So he actually went through the mountain, and the only side effects seem to be that there's a strange gelatin-like substance on his windshield, which is mildly radioactive, and there's an unusual amoeba-like creature that has attached itself to the jet car's drive shaft, and he takes it off and preserves it. The next thing we see is that there's a couple of kind of goofy duck hunters called Bert and Bubba, and they're out hunting, and they see something in the air that they think looks like a giant purple flying dinosaur. They shoot at it, and it's going to take them hours to go find it. They do. By the time they get there, it's dark, and they can't really see a whole heck of a lot, but something comes out of the top of this thing, and it looks to be like a Rasta man. He's wearing a silver jacket, and he's got long dreadlocks. He's holding a kind of, looks like a Boy Scout flashlight with 2 lights on it, and something else that we can't see. Something happens, and the thing rocks, and he falls and hits his head. And all of a sudden, his hair starts disappearing, he starts crackling, and he takes on this sort of strange appearance. He has what appear to be paws instead of hands, and the hunter sees something lying next to him, and Bubba says, "What is it?" And Bert says, "It's Buckaroo Banzai. It's the latest issue. It's a comic book of Buckaroo Banzai." And apparently he has his own comic series, too. And then another alien sneaks off while they're looking at this. There's a third one who's trapped inside, and he receives orders from his command, this kind of strange spaceship with these very high chairs and people wearing kind of goofy costumes. And they tell him, destroy yourself. you've been discovered. And these rather strange looking scientists come and they knock out the duck hunters, and they're trying to disassemble this thing. Meanwhile, some straight New Jersey state troopers arrive and they're saying, hey, let us handle it. And they punch them out too. They're obviously kind of bad guys. Next, we see Buckaroo and his band, the Hong Kong Cavaliers, are playing a gig at a place in New Jersey called Artie's Artery. And they're preparing to play a rather stylized, jazzy version of the song Rocket 88, which is the first real rock and roll song considered such by Jackie Brenston and his Delta Cats. Included a trombonist by the name of Ike Turner, and yes, that's that Ike Turner of Ike and Tina. And as they're playing this, all of a sudden, Buckaroo asks them to stop. He says, is somebody out there not having time? Is somebody crying out in the darkness? And a girl raises her hand and he says, it's me. And, don't worry. I just soaked up a little too much VAT 69. He says, give her a mic. I said, what do you mean give her a mic? And they bring her a microphone and spotlight. And she says, I got kicked out of my room in the Y this morning. I'm down to my last nickel in this lousy town. They won't even take my luggage and hock. And somebody in the audience starts laughing and making fun of her. And Weller says one of the best lines in the movie here. He says, hey, don't be mean. We don't have to be mean. Because remember, no matter where you go, there you are. And I love that line. It's silly. It doesn't make sense. But in a way, he's saying, don't make fun of people because you're not in their shoes. You don't know what they've gone through. And he starts playing a song just for her. And some of his bandmates are saying, hey, that girl looks just like Peggy. And he's saying, no, it's not. And he starts singing, Since I Don't Have You. And impressively, it is actually Weller playing the piano, and it's actually him singing. And when he was playing the trombone, he was doing that too. It's really him. But as he's singing the song, Ellen Barkin is preparing to kill herself. She takes a small gun out of her purse, and she's going to blow her head off. And a waiter walks by and tips her hand, and the gun goes off, and everybody freaks out. They tell her, all the band members have guns. All of a sudden, they tell her, kill that spotlight. And they kill the light, and she's arrested. Later, Banzai and New Jersey meet outside of the jail, and Jeff Goldblum was dressed up. He's wearing chaps, and he's got a cowboy shirt and a Stetson hat and a bolo tie. And one of the other members of the Cavaliers, Perfect Tommy, said, hey, Doc, where are your spurs at? And he goes, what's he making fun of me? I like that line. And then they go in, and he talks to this girl, Penny Pretty, through the bars, and he's asking her about her life, and she says, oh, nobody knows me. Nobody knows where I was born. He says, Cody, Wyoming? She says, no, I was raised in Laramie, but I was born in Cody. How did you know that? And he says, well, I think you had a twin sister. She says, I'm adopted. I always felt there was another part of me. He says, if it's a snake, it would have bit me. I think you had a twin sister and I married her, but she's gone and that's over. And that's all there is to that. He says, who are you really trying to kill? And she says, him, just like they said. And, we know that that's not true. And he asks to have her released, on his recognizance. And they go ahead and release her. Next, he's at a news conference, and he's talking with people, including the Secretary of Defense and the senator who we saw earlier, about what happened and the breakthrough that he's made. And next, we see a scene of John Lithgow as this mad scientist named Dr. Emilio Lizardo, who is in the Trenton Home for the Criminally Insane in Trenton, New Jersey. And he sees this conference, and he says, Keita, that little Asian critter, he has done it, and he starts writing these crazy equations on the wall. One of the guards at the prison says, hey, who are you today, Doc? Albert Einstein? He says, no, Lord John Wharton. If there's one thing I hate, it's to be mistaken for somebody else. He says, sorry, Doc. And he says, he starts getting ready to leave. Says, where are you going, Doc? He says, the moon? He says, no, planet 10. He goes, oh, planet 10. I'll leave an early wake-up call for you. And he's Lithgow says again a great line, and he says this in this kind of funny Italian accent, "Laugh while you can, a monkey boy." And then he strangles the guard and calls up his friend John Big Booty, who's Christopher Lloyd at Yoyodyne Propulsion System, that says, "I'm coming, haven't you seen the news? Banzai hasn't done it," and he plans to steal the overthruster. And he disappears. And then, like I said, Banzai is at this news conference, and apparently he gets a call from the President of the United States. He goes out in the corridor to take this call, and he gets zapped by electricity. And all of a sudden, he runs back in, and he can see that several of the people at the conference are evil. They're red droids from Planet 10. And they kidnap Professor Hikita and say, everybody drop your guns, or, the professor gets it. And they kidnap him. Banzai goes after them on a motorcycle that he steals from an incoming motorcycle convention. And one of the guys says, "Hey, you can't ride that bike." Hey, it's Buckaroo Banzai. Everybody recognizes him. Everybody knows who he is. He's going after these people. They're driving a van down Route 4, I think, in New Jersey. And somebody his associate calls him and tells him that, and this is before cell phones, so he actually calls him on a Swiss Army knife that has a communication device planted in it. Which originally, interestingly, in the book, they referred to that technology as cellular. So that's pre-cell phone, though. They're talking about this, and that's kind of impressive. But he tells him they kidnapped the professor right out of the conference, and we think that they're lectroids from Planet 10. And he says, instead of cursing, he says, "The deuce you say." And my dad cracked up at that line. He loved the fact that they said, "The deuce you say," not a curse word. And then he goes after them, and he recovers the professor, and he tells him, I can see them. They gave me some kind of formula. And he says, "What's this?" And he says, "It's your hand, Buckaroo." He says, "There's a formula written on it." And he says, "Well, it allows me to see, it's some kind of electrochemical message. It allows me to see them how they really are." And he says, "Well, give me the formula." And he licks his hand and touches Robert Ito's head, and now he can see them too. Meanwhile, Carl Lumley, who's the guy who escaped from the thermopod, rides up on a bicycle at the Banzai Institute and knocks, and his associate, Pinky Carruthers, as Billy Vera asks him, "Hey, what do you want?" He says, "Must see Buckaroo Banzai." And he hands him up a pink cake box. And he says, "Sorry, buddy, sorry, I'm John Parker." He says, "Sorry, John, lots of people need see Buckaroo." Later, he takes the cake box. Meanwhile, up in the lab, they're trying to figure out, who these people are. And they're looking at a company called Yoyodyne Propulsion Systems. And they can't figure out, who they are. And Jeff Goldblum finally cracks the cipher, and he's looking at the names, and it doesn't make sense because all their first names are John. They're John O'Connor, John Nolan, John Yaya, John Smallberries, and they're saying, "Oh, this must be a joke, John, John, John." He says, "No, wait a minute. They all registered on November 1st, 1938 at Yoyodyne Propulsion Systems, and they don't have any names or dates of birth." He says, "Wait a minute. 30 days has November, October. Oh, October 31st, Halloween." He says, "What does that mean?" He says, "Don't you get it? Orson Welles." Perfect Tommy says something funny. He says, "You mean that guy from the old wine commercials?" And I thought that was great. They don't know who Orson Welles is as a director. They just know him from those stupid, wine commercials that he used to do. And he says, "No, the false broadcast fake radio broadcast that said there was an invasion from space." And then he said, "Oh, no, it's just a radio show hoax." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, what if it wasn't? What if it isn't a hoax?" They sent him and then they play the record. The record kind of shows a hologram. It won't talk to anybody until Buckaroo gets there. And it's a hologram of Rosalind Cash, who is called John M. Dahl. Apparently, all people from Planet 10 think that all people's on Earth's name are John. So it doesn't matter that it's female. Her name is John M. Dahl. And she tells him, "You've accidentally helped, we, a long time ago, imprisoned an evil dictator named as evil as your Hitler, named the self-proclaimed Lord John Worfen, and you have accidentally helped John Worfen with your discovery of the oscillation overthruster, because our intelligence says he plans to steal your overthruster and return to Planet 10 to take back over. And if that happens, we're going to fire a particle beam from your airspace to Smolensk and start World War III. And you have 24 hours to stop Lord John Worfen. And end of discussion. He says, "What discussion?" And he says to one of his Blue Blaze regulars who's helping him, says, "You got to be kidding me, man, and destroy the whole world?" And he says, "You want to roll those dice, Casper?" He says, "No, not me, man." So they're going to go now to Yo-Yo-Dyne propulsion systems and figure things out. Meanwhile, Penny is trying to figure out, why there's a picture that looks like her in Buckaroo's private chambers. And she asks him, who is that girl, and what's going on. He can't really tell her. But meanwhile, some of these red electroids break into the Institute. They kill Sam, the jet car mechanic, and they're looking to find the overthruster. And Christopher Lloyd, who is hilarious in this movie, he plays a character called John Big Boutte, and everybody's always calls him John Big Booty, and he gets really mad. He says, "Big Boutte, Boutte," and he says, "John O'Connor," to Vincent Schiavelli, "John O'Connor, smash the window." He says, "Why do I have to do it, John Big Boutte?" He says, "Because it might be booby-trapped." He says, "Okay." Apparently he doesn't know what the word booby-trap means. He goes ahead and breaks the window. Of course, there's no overthruster, so they go into the lab to try to find it. And Professor Hikita has it down in the observation wing. And there's a very funny moment here where Jeff Goldblum is trying to help Banzai, and I think it's Reno, Pepe Serna, who's walking with him. And he sees a watermelon between two pressure plates. And he looks at it and he says, "Why is there a watermelon there?" And Pepe Serna says, "I'll tell you later." Of course, he never does. That's a typical, like a Doctor Who kind of line. It's making fun of that thing. "I'll tell you later." And anyway, the electroids break in. They don't manage to get Hikita because he slips the overthruster into Penny Pretty's purse and says, "Here, young lady, take this." And unfortunately, they kidnap her. They don't realize that she's got the overthruster, but they take her, and now Banzai is left to try to figure out what's going on. The electroids have killed Rawhide by spitting this sort of a spider onto his spine, which is obviously just a few little shrimp that they put together. And he asks John Parker, "Is there any cure for this thing?" He says, "No," and he stomps on it. And so now they're going to have to go to Yo-Yo-Dyne and figure things out. He gets a call from John Worfen on World Watch 1 and says, "I've got your associate, Dr. Penny Pretty, here, and, if he's torturing her and if you value her life, you'll come, and you'll come alone to Yo-Yo-Dyne, and, you know where it is, and come alone." Well, of course, he's not going to come alone. He's taken his whole team with him. He's also rounded up some of these people who help him, the Blue Blazer regulars, and some people called the Rug Suckers and the Kolodny brothers. And they're going to form two teams, and they're going to go in and assault Yo-Yo-Dyne. The Secretary of State, meanwhile, Defense, rather, Buckaroo has alerted the president to what's going on. He's had his associate, Mrs. Johnson, play the record from John Emdahl. And the president, played by Ronald Lacey, is also very funny. His associate, his secretary of, I think, the Interior or somebody is Yakov Smirnov, or I think he's his Russian ambassador. And he's telling him, the Russians have gone to DefenseCon 2 because of this space cloud, and, we need to take care of this. And there's an EMP event, and it frightens all of them. But he tells them, he plays the record, and the president said, "Well, that's very enlightening, but it's kind of weird, and, I don't understand, nuclear extortion and, aliens from the 10th dimension, a girl named John, and he says, but, go ahead and, go and try to stop them." So Buckaroo does that, and they break into the bivouac of the red electroids, and they're looking around, and there's a lot of weird stuff. And of course, just at that moment, since it's, inopportune, the Secretary of Defense shows up and he wants to talk to John Big Boutte because he's expecting them to build a bomber. Well, they're not building a bomber, they're building a troop ship to take John Worfen and his disciples back to Planet 10 through the eighth dimension if they can steal the overthruster. He goes down and he goes on into the pit, which is spelled P-I-T-T in typical what's known as Gellerese. If you remember Mission Impossible, Geller used to have signs, put up that were readable in English, but funny, like secret spelled S-E-K-R-I-T, and they have kind of some of that stuff in there too. A little bit of a nod, I guess. And he goes to see Big Boutte, and he's in the pit torturing Penny Pretty, Ellen Barkin, and he says, "Look, I don't care about your personal life. He says, but I came here to see a bomber, and this sure ain't it." And he looks around, and there's like water on the floor, and everything's kind of gross. He says, "Don't you have any pride? This place is a pigsty." And Christopher Lloyd says one of the funniest lines in the movie. He picks him up by his necktie and says in this crazy voice that sounds kind of like Reverend Jim from Taxi, he says, "Not my goddamn planet, understand, monkey boy?" I think it's just really funny the way he says that. Everybody in the movie, in the audience, cracked up at that line. And then the secretary realizes that the overthruster is still in Penny's purse, and he tries to get it, but I think he passes out. There's also a book in Penny's purse, which I found interesting. The title of it is Future History, and it's written by Dr. Buckaroo Banzai and Professor Akita. I always wondered what was in that book, but that's one of the things that, again, I'll tell you later. It's not explained. So Banzai and his men, New Jersey, and everybody else is trying to, Perfect Tommy and everybody's trying to figure out what's going on. There's a big fight that sort of accidentally starts when somebody shoots one of the red electrodes and he's zapped by electricity and sets off an alarm. And Worfen captures Banzai and is torturing him to try to get the information to complete his overthruster, and he won't give it to him. And so he's torturing him more, and then there's an EMP event caused by this short out, and Buckaroo manages to escape. But he says, a lot of funny lines while he's doing that. And he starts giving this like really weird, sort of Mussolini from the balcony type speech where he says, "Character is what you are in the dark, and massacre them without a quarter," and things like that, which is, really funny, goofy kind of stuff. He's given this, big inspirational speech to people who don't really seem very inspired by anything he says. But he's going to try to launch this ship without the overthruster, which he hasn't found. And the Secretary of State's also looking for it. And one of the junior Blue Blazer regulars, Casper Lindley, finds it, and he's holding it for Buckaroo. And the Secretary of State comes up to him and says, "You want to give me that? I'll give you a $20 bill." And he's holding this gun. He says, "That's not real," and he shoots it. He says, "Step away from that car. I'll drink your blood." He's just being a real badass. I thought that was funny too. And then, events kind of go. There's a big gun battle. Buckaroo and John Parker stow away aboard what's called the Panther ship, the troop ship, and Lord John Worfen's trying to take off, and John Big Boutte says, "It won't work, your overthruster's the shits," and he gets really mad. He says, "Shut up, John Big Boutte, you're the weakest individual I ever know," and he gives him the finger and says, "John Big Boutte, tay," and then he shoots him, and John O'Connor, kind of goes like this, like, "Screw you," to John Big Boutte, and he takes his place. And then he's trying to work this overthruster which he used with his feet, and all the beams are going all over, they won't meet. And, they just crash through the wall and they end up in the atmosphere. And he realizes that Buckaroo is snuck on board because he gasps. And he says, "Banzai, I got to jettison the extra baggage." And he, shoots him out of the ship. And he's in this little, what they call a thermopod. Carl Lumley doesn't know how to drive it because he's a diplomat and he failed flight school. And Banzai figures out that he has to jumpstart it with the battery cables. And then suddenly he discovers that there's a gun on the ship, a laser beam. And he tells Carl Lumley, "John Parker, take this wheel. It drives like a truck." And Carl Lumley replies, Good. What is a truck? You know, that's a great line too. You know, he's not from Earth, doesn't know what truck is, but he manages to catch them, go left. He says, I am going left. He says, no, my left. You go to the right. You know, and he says, he lines him up and he fires the beam. He says, you know, Worf and sayonara, and the ship blows up. And the last thing John Lithgow says is, Banzai, I'll see you in a hell. You know, it's really funny. And then on the main alien spaceship, they see that, you know, he destroyed them, and this guy, and he's wearing these big, like, leather cricket mitts. And I don't know why, but he takes his mitts and he says, John Worfen destroyed. And the leader says, reset particle beam, plotting 000. So they're not going to destroy Smolensk after all, since he accomplished his mission. Banzai parachutes out of the thermopod, and John Parker takes off. And then he arrives at World Watch 1, and New Jersey tells him that Ellen Barkin didn't make it. Her injuries were too severe, and he couldn't save her. He did his best. He goes, and he's going to give her, you know, one last kiss. As he does this, you see the leader of the alien ship press a button, and a spark shoots between Banzai's lips and hers, and her knee rises, and she's reborn, as it were. And then they make a little romantic small talk, and they're going to make out, obviously. And the leader says, so what? Big deal. And that's basically the end of the movie. The credits play. They're all marching and dancing in the LA River. And you see a sign that says Buckaroo Banzai. And you see at the end of the credits, a teaser for another movie called Buckaroo Banzai Against the World Crime League, which was never made, though it was adapted into a graphic novel, which I have not seen. I was told it wasn't very good. But anyway, it's a fun, hilarious, goofy movie. It's got everything. It's a superhero movie. It's a science fiction movie. It's a fantasy. It's a thriller. It's a mystery. It's a romantic comedy. It's a parody of a lot of things. There are an enormous number of quotable, funny lines like, where are we going? Planet 10. When? Real soon. You know, and what is the greatest joy? The joy of duty. You know, and just really hilarious stuff. Everyone in the cast is marvelous. Really well acted, really well made. The special effects are kind of but given the fact that it didn't have a great budget, I still think they did a very good job for the time, for the early 80s. It's certainly not Blade Runner, but it's not meant to be either. I don't think it was made to be anything but other than what it is, which is a tongue-in-cheek parody, and it's great, and I highly recommend it. World Watch 2 out.